This morning, there was the panel of judges that were to present our appeal case. As some of you may know, Coca-Cola initially was thrown out of our ADCA claim, which Coca-Cola said, look, it's a victory for us. Coca-Cola Atlanta is not in the litigation, only our independent bottlers. And therefore, we, Coca-Cola Atlanta, even though we own controlling stock and 46% of the Class A stock, are now responsible for what our bottlers do locally. We appealed that, partially in the fact that the current judge, named Jose Martinez, a Republican nominee by the first Bush, had in fact a conflict of interest, where he also happens to be the radio announcer for Miami Hurricanes football, which is sponsored and brought to you by the Coca-Cola company. He dismissed the case, not based on merit, but on base what was generally called a jurisdiction, saying that in fact the case could proceed if it was brought forward properly. So within 60, 90 days, we'll find out what the appeal was, although we're very confident that despite the 3 conservative judges in the 11th Circuit, that we can win the appeal and make sure that Coca-Cola Atlanta headquarters is included along with the 2 local bottlers.
Can you talk a little bit, first of all, about the conflict between workers who are under accord contracts with Coca-Cola bottling companies and workers that are under the unions, and how that dynamic comes into play?
We'll take your question too.
My question is, what is the local and national police in Colombia doing to help eliminate the situation that's happening here with?
That might be a short answer.
Yeah.
La diferencia que hay entre los trabajadores sindicalizados en Colombia con la que no son sindicalizados, pues es bien horrible, porque los que están temporales, digamos, los que no están sindicalizados, porque son contratados por empresas temporales o subcontratados, y estos trabajadores no tienen derecho a seguro médico, no tienen derecho a vacaciones, no tienen derecho a primas, no tienen derecho a indemnización el día que son despedidos, o son contratados a contratos de 3 meses, 6 meses, tienen que quedarse fuera 1 o 2 semanas o un mes, dependiendo la empresa, y luego volver a aplicar para volverles a dar trabajo por otro periodo de 6 meses, 3 meses, lo que la empresa quiera, para no poder pagar indemnización. Cuando hay la unión o el sindicato es que tienen que pagar las primas, las vacaciones, los aguinaldos, el día que te despiden tienen que pagarte el tiempo que estuviste ahí, una indemnización por ese tiempo. O sea, hay muchos beneficios cuando tienes un sindicato, es lo mismo que acá. Aquí cuando las personas no están sindicalizadas, los patrones abusan, les pagan lo que quieren y los despiden el día que quieren. ¿Por qué? Porque no hay un contrato firmado entre el trabajador y el empresario.
The situation with workers who are not affiliated to an independent union are very terrible. It's a difficult situation where, as some of you know, based on personal experience in this country, the company seeks to employ you temporarily or to have you subcontracted, otherwise outsourced, which does not permit you any type of paid leave, vacation time, benefits, pension, paid time off. Neither do they pay your holiday time or what's called the severance package, that if you were to leave without having claimed those benefits, you would still have a right to a monetary compensation. None of that exists, obviously. Members of our union do have that capacity, yet the situation is that most workers now in Colombia have been squeezed out of a union, either through violence or through intimidation. And because of that is why now most workers, as is somewhat similar here in the US, are faced with that very difficult situation of not having a true union power. And to reply to your question, sir, about what the national or local police will do to help the situation, they're part of the problem. Particularly, as Adolfo mentioned in his story, and has taken place many times throughout recent memory, that many times, members of the government or the system of legislation within Colombia are previous Coke employees. And in some cases, the same paramilitary groups that we mentioned committing this violence are directly supervised, trained, or led by former military officials, including the police. The general that we mentioned, Rito Alejo del Rio, who led the 17th Brigade, that was known as the pacifier of the region by our current president, who was a known collaborator of paramilitaries, is in fact in prison because of that collusion, that he has been involved with directly administering these forces locally against workers who are trying to preserve human rights.
Ken Nash, WBAI Radio. Do you have an update as to the status of the Colombia Free Trade Agreement in the U.S. Congress? And is Obama still hanging tough on that? I know he stuck out forcefully during the campaign, but now he's in power.
En la cuestión del TLC para Colombia y pues toda Latinoamérica que han querido implementar en este país, el señor Bush y las grandes multinacionales, tenemos que decir de que hasta el momento está frenado este trámite con Colombia, y pues lo que queremos trabajar este año con Obama es que se suspenda definitivamente el Tratado de Libre Comercio para Colombia, siempre y cuando no se mejoren las condiciones para los pequeños comerciantes en Colombia, los pequeños empresarios y los trabajadores en Colombia, y la cuestión del medio ambiente, que se pongan las cosas claras. ¿Por qué? Porque si vamos, por ejemplo, a lo que pasó en México, acabaron con el país, con el medio ambiente, la gente la hicieron venir para acá a buscar trabajo aquí, porque los que cultivaban maíz los arruinaron allá. Llegaron las grandes multinacionales de tiendas y los pequeños tenderos que habían fueron quebrados y tuvieron que emigrar para este país. O sea, es como la explotación de la mano de obra en primer lugar. Segundo lugar, la ruina para los pequeños empresarios. Y tercer lugar, el daño al medio ambiente. Entonces nosotros, pues el trabajo que pensamos hacer este año es con Obama eso, de tratar de parar definitivamente el Tratado de Libre Comercio para Colombia, siempre y cuando no haya una reestructuración que beneficie a todo el mundo en Colombia, que no beneficie únicamente a los ricos y a las multinacionales.
With respect to your question about the free trade agreement that our friend Bush tried to bring forth several times, our main motivation is to continue to call for its suspension, that it not be passed. Particularly the fact that there is still no guarantees for particularly small business, for workers, and for the environment, and which is something that we hope to more work with the current administration of Obama, that shows very clearly that, in fact, it's to the benefit of capital, to the benefit of the rich, of the wealthy, and of multinationals. And if you see one of the banners that we often travel around with, it shows the direct intervention of Uncle Sam, right? The free trade agreements that are the macro structure of how a company like Coca-Cola could, and supposedly in good faith investment in a country like Colombia, get away with the spilling of blood for that of a product like Coke.